The USS Horizon drifted through the void near the Kepler 442 system, its sensors sweeping the darkness for signs of life. Lieutenant Jack Martinez sat at his communications console, monitoring the usual background chatter of space traffic and distant star formations. The ship had been on exploration duty for 6 months, cataloging new worlds and looking for signs of intelligent life. So far, they had found nothing but empty planets and asteroid fields. Jack was reviewing the daily reports when his console erupted with activity. Warning lights flashed across his screen as an unknown signal appeared on the long-range sensors. The sound was unlike anything in their databases, a complex pattern of tones that seemed almost musical. Jack's heart raced as he realized what this meant. "Captain Morgan to the bridge," he called over the intercom. "We have an unknown contact approaching our position." Captain Lisa Morgan arrived within minutes, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and her green eyes alert with excitement. She had been waiting for this moment her entire career. First contact with an alien species was the dream of every explorer in the fleet. "What do we have, Martinez?" she asked, moving to stand behind his chair. "Unknown vessel, approximately 2 kilometers in length," Jack reported, his fingers dancing across the controls. "It's moving on an intercept course but showing no hostile intent. The ship design is unlike anything in our records." Through the main view screen, they could see the alien vessel approaching. It was beautiful in a way that took Jack's breath away. The ship looked like it had been grown rather than built, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Strange lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that reminded Jack of a heartbeat. "They're transmitting," Jack announced, his voice barely containing his excitement. "It's the same musical pattern we detected earlier, but it's getting more complex," Captain Morgan nodded. "Can you establish communication?" "I'm trying, but their language is completely different from anything we've encountered." "Wait, there's something else coming through." Jack adjusted his headset and concentrated on the incoming signal. "They're sending mathematical sequences now, basic arithmetic. They're trying to establish a common language." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Jack worked tirelessly to decode the alien transmissions while the bridge crew watched. The mysterious vessel held position a safe distance away. The aliens seemed as cautious as the humans, neither side wanting to make the first aggressive move. Finally, breakthrough came. The aliens transmitted a simple message in broken English. "We are Zephyrians. We seek peaceful meeting." "Send representatives for talk?" Captain Morgan looked around the bridge at her crew. Chief Science Officer Karen White, a tall woman with curly red hair, was studying the alien ship through her scanners. Security Chief Rick Johnson stood ready at his post, his hand resting on his weapon but not drawing it. Everyone understood the importance of this moment. "Martinez, how good is your linguistics training?" Captain Morgan asked. 4 years at the academy, plus 3 alien language specializations," Jack replied. "I've been studying xenolinguistics since I was a kid." "Good, you'll be part of the first contact team." "White Johnson, you're with us too. We'll take a shuttle over to their ship." Jack felt a mixture of excitement and terror as he prepared for the meeting. This was what he had trained for his entire career, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of meeting an alien species. He checked his universal translator one more time and made sure his diplomatic protocols were fresh in his mind. The shuttle bay was a flurry of activity as the team prepared for departure. Jack wore his dress uniform, the blue fabric crisp and clean, with his communications badge polished to a mirror shine. Captain Morgan wore her formal captain's jacket, while Dr. White carried a small case of scientific instruments. Rick Johnson wore his security uniform but carried no visible weapons. Following standard first contact protocols. As their shuttle approached the alien vessel, Jack could see more details of its construction. The ship's hull seemed to shift and change color as they watched, cycling through shades of blue and silver like a living thing. Strange symbols appeared and disappeared along its surface, possibly writing in their alien language. "Docking port is opening," announced their pilot, Lieutenant Amy Foster. "Their technology is compatible with our system somehow." The docking process was surprisingly smooth. The alien ship seemed to adapt to their shuttle's requirements, extending mechanical arms that guided them into position. As they stepped through the airlock, Jack felt his heart pounding with anticipation. The interior of the Zephyrian ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls curved and flowed like the inside of a seashell, with soft lighting that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The air smelled clean and fresh, with a hint of something like ocean spray. Then he saw them. The Zephyrians were tall, easily 7 feet in height, with slender builds that moved with fluid grace. Their skin was the most remarkable thing about them, shifting between shades of blue and silver like the surface of a calm sea, but it was their eyes that took Jack's breath away. They were large and multifaceted, like jewels, and seemed to hold entire galaxies within their depths. The lead Zephyrian stepped forward, moving with careful precision. When she spoke, her voice was melodic but carefully controlled. "I am Lyra Nine Stars, diplomatic representative of the Zephyrian Collective. We welcome you to our vessel." Her English was perfect, though spoken with a slight accent that made every word sound like music. Jack noticed that she kept her gaze focused on a point just above their heads, never making direct eye contact. "I am Captain Lisa Morgan of the United Earth Fleet," Captain Morgan replied formally. "We are honored by your welcome and hope this meeting will begin a friendship between our peoples." The formal introductions continued for several minutes, with each side following careful diplomatic protocols. Jack noticed that the Zephyrians spoke only in measured, factual terms, never showing any emotion or personal opinion. They seemed fascinated by human technology but approached everything with scientific curiosity rather than wonder. As the initial meeting progressed, Jack found himself studying Lyra Nine Stars more closely. There was something about her that seemed familiar, though he couldn't quite place what it was. Despite her formal manner, he sensed a depth to her that the rigid diplomatic language couldn't quite hide. The meeting ended with an agreement to continue negotiations over the following days. Both sides would exchange cultural information and work toward establishing formal diplomatic relations. As the human team prepared to return to their shuttle, Jack took one last look at the Zephyrian ship's amazing interior. He had no idea that this first meeting would change everything, not just for their two species, but for his own understanding of what it meant to be human. The negotiations had been going on for 3 days, and Jack Martinez was beginning to understand just how different the Zephyrians were from humans. Every conversation followed the same pattern: formal greetings, exchange of factual information, and polite farewells. No jokes, no personal stories, no expressions of opinion or feeling. It was like talking to very advanced computers that happened to look like beautiful alien beings. Jack sat in the conference room aboard the USS Horizon, reviewing his notes from the morning session. Across from him, Chief Science Officer Karen White was studying her scanner readings with a puzzled expression on her face. Captain Morgan paced near the viewport, clearly frustrated by the slow progress. "They're impossible to read," Captain Morgan said, breaking the silence. "Every question gets answered with pure facts. Ask them about their homeworld, and they give you atmospheric composition and orbital mechanics. Ask about their culture, and they recite population statistics." Karen looked up from her scanner. "That's what's bothering me, too. My readings show they have complex brain activity, emotional centers that should be active, but they never show any feelings at all. It's like they're suppressing something." Jack nodded, remembering his interactions with Lyra Nine Stars. "I've noticed they never make eye contact either. Even during direct conversation, they always look just past us or at some point on the wall. In human culture, that would suggest discomfort or deception." "Maybe that's just their way," suggested Lieutenant Rick Johnson from his position by the door. "Not every species has to be like us." "But that's just it," Karen continued, pulling up her data on the main screen. "Their brain scans show patterns that are remarkably similar to human emotional responses. They should be capable of feelings, but something is preventing them from expressing them." The door chimed, and Lieutenant Amy Foster entered with a data pad. "Captain, the Zephyrians are requesting another meeting in 2 hours. Same format as before, formal diplomatic exchange in Conference Room 3, Captain Morgan sighed. Very... Well, Martinez, you'll take the lead on linguistic analysis again. Try to find some way to break through their formality. We need to understand what makes them tick if we're going to establish any real relationship. Jack spent the next hour preparing for the meeting, but his mind kept wandering to Lyra 9 Stars. There was something about her that seemed different from the other Zephyrians, though he couldn't quite identify what it was. During their conversations, he had caught glimpses of something deeper behind those galaxy-filled eyes. Moments when her perfect composure seemed to slip just slightly. The meeting began exactly as the others had. The Zephyrians arrived precisely on time, arranged themselves in perfect formation, and began the formal greeting ritual. Lyra 9 Stars spoke for her delegation, her voice as melodious and controlled as always. We acknowledge the continued diplomatic exchange between our peoples, she said, her eyes focused on a point just above Jack's left shoulder. Today's session will address territorial boundaries and resource allocation protocols. Jack tried a different approach this time. Instead of responding with equally formal language, he smiled and said, "Before we begin, I hope you've been comfortable during your stay. Our facilities must seem quite different from your ship." The other Zephyrians exchanged glances, and Jack noticed their skin colors shift slightly, becoming more blue than silver. Lyra 9 Stars paused for a moment before responding. The atmospheric composition and gravity settings are within acceptable parameters for our physiological requirements. That's good to hear, Jack continued, maintaining his casual tone. I have to admit, I'm curious about your homeworld. What's it like to walk under your sun? Again, that slight pause. Our primary star emits radiation across a spectrum that provides optimal photosynthetic conditions for our plant life. Surface temperature averages 23 degrees Celsius with minimal seasonal variation. Jack felt like he was hitting a wall. Every attempt at personal conversation was met with scientific facts and technical specifications. He glanced at Captain Morgan, who nodded encouragingly. They had agreed to try pushing boundaries during this session. The formal negotiations continued for another hour, covering trade agreements and territorial boundaries. The Zephyrians were fair and logical in their proposals, but there was no warmth or enthusiasm in their responses. They treated the entire process like a mathematical equation to be solved. During a brief recess, Jack noticed Lyra 9 Stars standing alone near the viewport, looking out at the stars. The other Zephyrians had gathered in a tight group, engaged in quiet discussion, but she had separated herself from the group. Something about her posture seemed different, less rigid than usual. Jack approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. The view is beautiful from here, he said quietly. That's the Andromeda Galaxy, visible even from this distance. She didn't turn around, but he saw her reflection in the viewport. Her large eyes seemed to be drinking in the sight of the distant stars, and for a moment her expression was almost wistful. We have a saying in our ancient language, she said so quietly that Jack almost missed it. The stars remember what we choose to forget. That's beautiful, Jack replied genuinely, moved by the poetic nature of her words. What does it mean? Lyra 9 Stars seemed to catch herself, and her posture immediately became rigid again. It is merely a historical reference to our species' early astronomical observations, not relevant to current diplomatic proceedings. But Jack had seen something. In that moment, a crack in the perfect facade. There was emotion there, carefully hidden but definitely present. He made a mental note to discuss this with Karen later. The session resumed, and the Zephyrians returned to their formal negotiation style. But Jack noticed small changes in Lyra 9 Stars throughout the remainder of the meeting. Occasionally, she would glance toward the viewport, and once, when discussing their star charts, her voice carried a hint of something that might have been excitement. After the Zephyrians had returned to their ship, Jack found himself in the science lab with Karen sharing his observations. There's definitely something there, he told her. She quoted poetry, Karen. That's not the behavior of a purely logical species. Karen nodded thoughtfully. I've been analyzing their biosignatures during the meetings. There are subtle changes that suggest emotional responses, but they're being actively suppressed. It's like they're fighting against their own nature. But why would they do that? Jack asked. What would make an entire species suppress their emotions? I don't know, Karen admitted. But if we're going to make any real progress with them, we need to understand what happened to make them this way. Tomorrow's session might be our last chance. They're growing more formal and distant with each meeting. Jack stared out the labs. Viewport at the Zephyrian ship, its hull still shifting through those beautiful patterns of blue and silver. Somewhere inside that vessel, Lyra Nine Stars was probably standing at her own viewport, looking at the stars and remembering things. Her people had chosen to forget. He was determined to find out what those things were. The fourth day of negotiations began with troubling news. Jack Martinez arrived at the conference room to find Captain Morgan and Chief Science Officer Karen White already deep in discussion, their faces grim with concern. What's the situation? Jack asked, settling into his chair and activating his translation equipment. The Zephyrian sent a message 2 hours ago, Captain Morgan replied, sliding a datapad across the table. They're preparing to end negotiations and return to their home system. They claim our cultures are too different for meaningful cooperation. Jack read the formal message, noting the cold, distant language that had become frustratingly familiar. They're giving up? After we've made real progress on the trade agreements? That's what doesn't make sense, Karen said, pulling up her latest scans on the wall display. My readings show increased stress patterns in their biosignatures. They're not leaving because they're satisfied with the outcome. They're leaving because they're afraid of something. Jack thought back to his brief moment with Lyra Nine Stars at the viewport. The way she had quoted that ancient saying about stars remembering what people chose to forget. There had been real emotion in her voice then, carefully hidden but definitely present. What if we're approaching this wrong? Jack suggested. We've been trying to work within their formal diplomatic framework, but maybe that's exactly what's preventing us from connecting with them. Captain Morgan leaned forward. What do you mean? I mean, maybe their formality isn't their natural state. Maybe it's a barrier they've built to protect themselves from something. And every time we follow their rules, we're reinforcing that barrier instead of breaking through it. The door chimed, and Lieutenant Amy Foster entered with another message. Captain, the Zephyrians are requesting one final meeting before their departure. They want to formalize the end of negotiations and exchange farewell protocols. When? Captain Morgan asked. In 1 hour, same location as before. After Amy left, the room fell silent. Jack could feel the weight of missed opportunity pressing down on them. First contact with an alien species was supposed to be humanity's greatest achievement, but instead it felt like they were about to witness its greatest failure. I want to try something different, Jack said suddenly. Instead of following their formal protocols, what if I just talked to them like they were people? What if I ignored their diplomatic framework and spoke from the heart? Karen looked worried. That could be considered a violation of first contact protocols. If you offend them, it might damage any chance of future relations. But if we don't try something different, there won't be any future relations anyway, Jack pointed out. They're leaving and we'll probably never see them again. What do we have to lose? Captain Morgan considered this for a long moment. What exactly are you proposing? I want to tell them how I really feel about meeting them. Not the diplomatic version, but the human version. I want to tell them about the wonder and excitement of discovering we're not alone in the universe. I want to break through their formality and show them what genuine human emotion looks like. That's a huge risk, Captain Morgan warned. You could end this entire relationship before it begins. Or I could save it, Jack replied. Captain, I've been studying their behavior for 4 days. There's something they're hiding, something they're afraid to show us. Maybe if we show them our true selves first, they'll feel safe enough to do the same. After much discussion, Captain Morgan agreed to let Jack try his approach. The final meeting was scheduled to take place in the larger conference room with full diplomatic protocol suspended. Jack would be allowed to speak freely. With the understanding that he was taking full responsibility for the consequences, the Zephyrians arrived exactly on time, as always. Lyra Nine Stars led the delegation, her skin shifting through its usual pattern of blue and silver. She looked even more formal than usual, if such a thing were possible, and Jack noticed that none of the Zephyrians would make eye contact with the human delegation. We gather to formalize the conclusion of diplomatic negotiations between our species. Lyra Nine Stars began, her voice carrying the same controlled tone as always. While cultural exchange has been informative, fundamental differences prevent meaningful cooperation. Jack felt his heart racing as he prepared to throw away the diplomatic handbook. This was the moment when everything would either come together or fall apart completely. With respect, Lyra Nine Stars, Jack interrupted, standing up from his chair. I don't think that's true at all. The effect was immediate. Every Zephyrian in the room turned to look at him, their eyes wide with surprise. Lyra Nine Stars' skin flickered rapidly through colors Jack had never seen before. I've been watching all of you for 4 days, Jack continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. You speak in facts and figures, you follow rigid protocols, and you never show any emotion. But I don't think that's who you really are. He walked around the table, moving closer to the Zephyrian delegation. I've seen the way you look at our star charts with fascination, even though you try to hide it. I've noticed how your skin changes color when you're thinking about something that interests you. I've heard the poetry in your ancient sayings, even when you claim they're just historical references. Lyra Nine Stars took a step backward, her skin now cycling through rapid patterns of color. These observations are not relevant to diplomatic proceedings, she said, but her voice was less controlled than before. This isn't about diplomatic proceedings anymore, Jack said, his voice gentle but firm. This is about two species trying to understand each other. And I think we've been doing it wrong from the beginning. He looked directly into Lyra Nine Stars' magnificent eyes, breaking the unspoken rule that had governed all their previous interactions. Before we part ways, I need to say something personal. Something that has nothing to do with treaties or trade agreements. The room fell completely silent. Even the soft hum of the ship's engine seemed to fade away. Your eyes are stunning, Jack said, his voice filled with genuine wonder. They hold the beauty of entire nebulae, and when you look at the stars, I see wonder there that reminds me why we explore space in the first place. You're not just a diplomatic representative to me, you're a person, and you're amazing. The translation device on Lyra Nine Stars' belt fell silent. She stood frozen, her skin flickering through colors that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The other Zephyrians stepped backward, their eyes wide with what looked like shock or fear. For a moment that seemed to stretch forever, nobody moved or spoke. Then something extraordinary happened. Lyra Nine Stars began to tremble, and when she finally spoke, her voice was completely different from anything Jack had heard before. The silence in the conference room stretched on for what felt like hours, though Jack knew it could only have been seconds. Lyra Nine Stars stood perfectly still, her skin cycling through colors he had never seen before, brilliant purples and golds that seemed to glow from within. The other Zephyrians had backed away from her, their own skin patterns shifting to deeper blues that Jack was beginning to recognize as a sign of distress. Then, slowly, Lyra Nine Stars reached down and removed the translation device from her belt. She held it in her hands for a moment, looking at it as if seeing it for the first time, then set it carefully on the table between them. When she spoke, it was in halting English, her voice trembling with emotion that had been hidden for so long it seemed to surprise even her. No one has spoken to me like that in over 50 years, she said, her words carrying an accent that made them sound like music. No one has called me beautiful since I was a child. Jack felt his heart racing as he realized the magnitude of what was happening. This wasn't just a diplomatic breakthrough, it was something far more profound. He could see Captain Morgan and Karan White at the edge of his vision, both frozen in amazement at the transformation taking place before their eyes. I don't understand, Jack said gently, taking a careful step closer. Why would that be? You are beautiful, all of you are. Anyone can see that. Lyra Nine Stars' large eyes, Those magnificent galaxy-filled orbs that had captivated him from the first moment finally met his gaze directly. There were tears in them, actual tears that caught the light like liquid diamonds. "Because we are forbidden," she whispered, her voice growing stronger with each word. "For 1,000 years we have been forbidden to speak of beauty, to express wonder, to show any emotion that might lead to the madness that nearly destroyed us, the other." Zephyrians began to move closer, drawn by something in her voice that they seemed to recognize. Commander Vel 7 Moons, who had been silent throughout all their previous meetings, spoke up for the first time. "Lyra 9 stars, you must not," he said, but his own voice carried a note of uncertainty. "The protocols of silence exist for good reason. We cannot risk returning to the old ways." "What old ways?" Jack asked, looking between them. "What happened to your people?" Lyra 9 stars turned to face her fellow Zephyrians, her skin now glowing with warm golden light. "Tell me, Vel 7 Moons, do you remember the songs our grandparents used to sing? Do you remember the poems about the dancing stars and the music of the solar winds?" "Those are Forbidden's memories," Vel 7 Moons replied, but Jack could see his resolve weakening. "They belong to the time before the Great Silence." "What was the Great Silence?" Captain Morgan asked, speaking for the first time since Jack's declaration. Lyra 9 stars looked at each of her companions in turn, then back at Jack. "Our people were not always as you see us now. Once we were passionate beings, full of emotion and artistic expression. We wrote poetry about the stars, we sang songs that could make the very cosmos weep with beauty. But our emotions were so powerful that they led to terrible wars." She moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars just as Jack had seen her do during their previous meetings. "We fought over whose art was most beautiful, whose love was most pure, whose vision of the universe was most correct. Entire star systems were destroyed in wars that began with arguments about poetry. Billions died because we could not control our passions. So your people chose to give up emotion entirely?" Karen asked, her scientific mind clearly fascinated by the concept. "The Council of Reason decreed that all emotional expression be banned," Lyra 9 stars continued. "We developed the protocols of silence, systems of behavior that would prevent us from ever again allowing our feelings to control us. Children were taught from birth to speak only in facts, to think only in logical terms, to never acknowledge beauty or wonder or love." Jack felt a chill run down his spine as he began to understand the magnitude of what the Zephyrians had sacrificed. "But you still feel those things, don't you? You just hide them." "We are not supposed to," Vel 7 Moons said, but his voice was softer now. "The conditioning is designed to suppress all emotional responses. But sometimes, in quiet moments, we remember what we have lost." "That's why you quoted that ancient saying," Jack said to Lyra 9 stars. "About the stars remembering what we choose to forget." She nodded, fresh tears flowing down her cheeks. "I have spent my entire life following the protocols, speaking only in approved language, never acknowledging the beauty I see everywhere around me. But when you looked at me and spoke of wonder, when you called my eyes beautiful, something inside me broke free." Another Zephyrian, one who had never spoken before, stepped forward. "I remember the songs," she said quietly. "My grandmother sang them to me before the enforcers came and took her away for protocol violations. And I remember the taste of joy," added another. "The way it felt to watch a sunrise and feel happiness instead of just recording atmospheric data." Jack watched in amazement as more Zephyrians began to speak, each one sharing memories they had kept hidden for decades. Their skin patterns became more vibrant, more alive, as if the very act of remembering was bringing color back to their world. "This is dangerous," Vel 7 Moons warned, but even he seemed less certain than before. "The protocols exist for a reason. If we return to the old ways, we risk destroying ourselves again." "But look at them," Lyra 9 stars said, gesturing toward the human delegation. "They express emotion freely, they speak of beauty and wonder, they even make war sometimes. But they have not destroyed themselves. They have grown stronger." Jack realized this was a crucial moment. not just for the negotiations but for the entire future of the Zephyrian people. Maybe the problem wasn't emotion itself, he suggested carefully. Maybe the problem was not knowing how to control it. Humans feel anger, but we've learned to channel it into positive action. We feel love, but we've learned to express it without possessiveness. We feel wonder, and it drives us to explore and create rather than to destroy. You think we could learn this control? Lara 9 Stars asked, hope evident in her voice. I think you've already started, Jack replied. You felt emotion when I spoke to you, but you didn't hurt anyone. You shared your feelings with your companions, and instead of starting a war, you started a conversation. Around the room, Zephyrians were beginning to stand straighter, their skin patterns becoming more complex and beautiful. It was as if they were remembering not just their capacity for emotion, but their capacity for beauty itself. Perhaps, Vel 7 Moons said slowly, it is time to reconsider the protocols of silence. The weeks that followed would be remembered as the most remarkable period in the history of interspecies relations. What had begun as formal diplomatic negotiations had become something far more profound, the rebirth of an entire civilizations. Emotional heritage. Jack Martinez stood on the observation deck of the USS Horizon, watching as Zephyrian and human crew members worked together to install new communication arrays. The sight still amazed him. Zephyrians who had once spoken only in cold facts now laughed and shared stories as they worked alongside his fellow humans. Their skin patterns had become a living language of emotion, shifting through brilliant colors that reflected their thoughts and feelings in real time. It's incredible how quickly they've adapted, Captain Morgan said, joining Jack at the viewport. Dr. White says their brain patterns have completely changed. It's like they're becoming a different species. Not different, Jack corrected gently. They're becoming who they always were underneath. The emotions were always there, just buried under centuries of fear. Through the transparent aluminum, they could see Lyra 9 Stars working with Lieutenant Amy Foster to calibrate the new translation systems. The devices were no longer needed for basic communication, since most of the Zephyrians had proven remarkably quick at learning human languages, once they allowed themselves to express enthusiasm for the learning process. But the translators would help them understand the subtle emotional nuances that made human communication so rich. Jack, Captain Morgan said, her voice serious, I want you to know that what you did in that conference room was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever seen. Breaking every protocol in the book could have ended in disaster. I know, Jack replied, but it felt like the right thing to do. Sometimes you have to take risks to make real connections. The door to the observation deck opened and Lyra 9 Stars entered. Over the past weeks she had become more beautiful than Jack had ever imagined possible. Her skin now showed the full range of Zephyrian emotional expression, cycling through warm golds when she was happy, deep purples when she was thoughtful, and brilliant silvers when she was excited about something new. Jack, Captain Morgan, she said, her English now fluent and filled with the warmth that had been missing during their first meetings. I wanted to share some wonderful news. The Council of Reason has voted to officially suspend the protocols of silence. Captain Morgan smiled widely. That's amazing news. How did your people react? There was celebration throughout our fleet, Lyra 9 Stars replied, her skin glowing with joy. For the first time in 1,000 years, Zephyrians are singing again. Would you like to hear? She touched a control on her wrist communicator, and suddenly the observation deck was filled with the most beautiful sound Jack had ever heard. Dozens of Zephyrian voices joined together in harmony, singing in their own language but conveying emotions that needed no translation. The melody spoke of sorrow for what had been lost, joy for what had been found, and hope for what the future might bring. We are calling it the Song of Remembering, Lyra 9 Stars explained as the music faded. It tells the story of how a simple human kindness helped us remember who we were meant to be. Jack felt his cheeks grow warm with embarrassment. I didn't do anything special. I just told you the truth about how beautiful you are. That truth changed everything, she said, moving to stand beside him at the viewport. Do you know what your words meant to me? For 50 years I have looked at the stars and felt wonder, but I was forbidden to acknowledge that feeling. I watched the dance of the solar winds and felt joy, but I could never speak of it. When you called my eyes stunning, you gave me permission to feel beautiful again. Over the following days, the cultural exchange between the two species had accelerated beyond anyone's expectations. The Zephyrians shared technologies that seemed like magic to human eyes, ships that could heal themselves, energy sources that drew power from the quantum foam of space itself, and sensors that could detect life across impossible distances. But, more importantly, they shared their rediscovered art, Zephyrian poetry. It turned out was unlike anything in human literature. Their poems were living things, written in patterns of light and color that told stories with their entire beings. Their music incorporated harmonics that human ears could barely detect, creating symphonies that seemed to resonate with the very structure of space-time itself. In return, humans had shown the Zephyrians something equally valuable: how to express emotion without losing control. Human culture was full of examples of channeling passion into positive creation. Love songs that celebrated rather than possessed, protest music that fought injustice without promoting violence, and art that explored the darkest human emotions while ultimately affirming the value of life. We want to establish a permanent cultural exchange, Lyra 9 Stars told Jack as they walked through the Horizon's expanded art gallery, now filled with both human and Zephyrian works. Some of our people will remain here to study human emotional expression, while some of your people could come to our worlds to help us rebuild our artistic traditions. I'd love to be part of that program, Jack said without hesitation. There's so much we could learn from each other. They paused in front of a new installation, a collaborative piece created by human and Zephyrian artists working together. It combined human sculpture with Zephyrian light painting, creating something that neither species could have imagined alone. The sculpture depicted two figures, one human and one Zephyrian, reaching toward each other across the vastness of space. There's something else I wanted to tell you, Lyra 9 Stars said, her skin shifting to the soft pink that Jack had learned meant nervousness. The Council has asked me to serve as the first Zephyrian ambassador to humanity. I'll be traveling with your fleet, learning about human culture and teaching others about ours. That's wonderful, Jack replied, though he tried to keep the excitement out of his voice. The thought of having more time to get to know her better filled him with happiness. I was hoping, she continued, her skin now showing definite embarrassment, colors, that you might serve as my cultural liaison. The Council specifically requested you, given your role in helping us rediscover our emotions. Jack felt his heart skip a beat. I would be honored. As they stood together looking at the artwork, Jack reflected on how much had changed since that first formal meeting. What had begun as standard first contact protocols had become something unprecedented. Two species learning to share not just technology and territory, but the deeper experiences that made life worth living. Jack, Lyra 9 Stars said quietly, I want to thank you again for what you did. But I also want you to know that your gift to us goes beyond just helping us remember our emotions. You showed us that it's possible to be both logical and passionate, both controlled and free. You proved that emotion doesn't have to lead to destruction. And you taught me something too, Jack replied. You showed me that sometimes the most important things we can share with others aren't facts or technologies, but simple human truths about beauty and wonder. They turned back to the viewport, where both human and Zephyrian ships could be seen working together in the distance. The sight was beautiful in a way that would have been impossible to express under the old protocols of silence, but which now filled both species with the shared joy of discovery. Far ahead, new star systems waited to be explored, and both humans and Zephyrians would explore them together, carrying with them the lesson that Jack had learned in that crucial moment. Sometimes the most profound connections happen when we have the courage to speak from the heart and tell someone how beautiful they are.